Norse social stories, Viking laws, and justice. Have you ever thought that the Viking society was just made up of bloodthirsty barbarians living outside the rule of law? Surely you've heard plenty about their bloody raids, merciless battles, and tales of fierce warriors. But what if I told you that, behind that brutal exterior, they had a very strict legal system, and even had outdoor courts where justice was served right under the open sky? Imagine this: a vast open space, with people standing around, looking toward the center where an elder, holding a long staff, declares judgment. This isn't a courtroom with lawyers or judges as we know them. It's the Viking people. They could stand up, speak, file complaints, argue, and sometimes even fight to the death to protect their honor and rights. And if someone broke the law, the price they paid could be death. But that's not all. You've probably heard the phrase, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But why did the Vikings value the law so much? And why did they have a justice system that even warriors couldn't escape? In this video, you will discover the truth behind a Viking society that wasn't just filled with ruthless warriors, but also a community that valued justice and honor. You'll explore how the Vikings enforced justice, from outdoor trials to bloody revenge, and why sometimes their laws could be more effective than modern societies. Get ready. You won't be able to stop thinking about what happens next. 1. Thing. The outdoor court. Imagine a long summer day where the vast, wild sky of northern Europe looms. In an open space, thousands of Vikings gather to witness what they call thing, the outdoor court. This isn't your typical courtroom. No luxurious robes or large tables, no high thrones. Instead, the Vikings stand around in a circle, in a space as wide open as the freedom they cherish. Thing wasn't just a place to resolve common disputes. It was a platform for justice, where every citizen had the right to speak, where anyone, whether elderly or a fierce warrior, could stand up and defend their rights. You could be an ordinary farmer and still present your case to the council, and if you couldn't defend yourself with words, you might have to defend yourself with blood. Here, there are no lawyers or lengthy procedures. Instead, everyone used words as their weapon. Those with knowledge of the law, called law speakers, played a key role. They were the ones who remembered and passed down the laws of the community, ensuring justice was served by ensuring the law was properly enforced. The noteworthy thing here is that if someone was accused of a crime, not all cases were simply debated. If the involved parties couldn't reach an agreement, or if one felt that justice couldn't be served with words alone, they could challenge each other. A verbal fight alone might not suffice, and sometimes it led to a duel, or even a bloody revenge. And when that happened, no one could stay out of it. Not because they didn't want to, but because their respect for the law and personal honor forced them to participate. Everyone understood that a society without justice and laws couldn't survive. So thing wasn't just a trial. It was a form of social control, where law and honor weren't just abstract terms, but living principles that governed every action within the Viking community. These outdoor courts were where the truth was revealed, and justice was served in the light of day, in a vast space of freedom and responsibility. 2. Honor law. Blood for blood. The Viking legal system wasn't just about resolving disputes or handling crimes. One of the most profound and humane principles in Viking society was the honor law. And at its core, blood for blood was one of its most important principles. But before you think that the Vikings lived in endless rage and hatred, let's understand how this legal system worked. If a Viking was killed, The family of the victim wasn't just a group of angry people seeking unreasonable revenge. They weren't a group lost in blind rage. Instead, they acted according to the law, and their right wasn't just to kill to take revenge, but to protect their honor and enforce justice in an orderly fashion. Weregild, or compensation, was part of Viking law to compensate the victim's family. This wasn't just a simple payment, but a set price based on the importance of the person who was killed. This compensation could vary depending on the deceased's social standing. If it was a warrior, the price might be high, while a regular farmer could have a lower value. However, no matter who the person was, compensation ensured that the family of the victim wouldn't continue living in pain and loss without proper reparation. However, compensation wasn't always acceptable. If the victim's family felt that the death of their loved one couldn't be measured in money, they had the right to take revenge. And at that point, there was no room for mercy. Blood was repaid with blood, but not out of rage, but for the sake of justice. 3. The rites and specific acts of revenge in Viking society. In Viking society, blood for blood wasn't an impulsive act, but a process taken very seriously and considered a vital part of the justice system. These acts of revenge were often performed through formal rites, with clear principles to ensure that justice was carried out properly. 1. Rituals of confirming death. Before taking revenge, the victim's family had to officially confirm the death of their loved one. This often took place in a ceremony at Thing, where those responsible would stand and testify, affirming that the death wasn't due to chance, but an intentional act. This ceremony was communal, so the entire village or clan knew about the event. 2. Blood feud declaration. Once the death had been confirmed and compensation was rejected, the victim's family could officially declare revenge. This right wasn't arbitrary. It was a legal right. This declaration was made publicly, usually in front of the community during a Thing session. If there was no intervention from the community or the offender's relatives, the victim's family could begin their act of revenge. 3. Forms of revenge. Revenge wasn't necessarily an immediate attack, but could be carried out in different forms, depending on the severity of the crime and the agreement of the community. Some common forms of revenge included killing. If the victim's death was especially grievous, or if the family didn't receive proper compensation, they could take revenge by killing the offender. However, this wasn't always simple, as killing a Viking could lead to an endless cycle of revenge between clans. Attacking the family or property. Instead of directly killing the perpetrator, the victim's family might take revenge by attacking the perpetrator's property. They could burn houses, kill livestock, or destroy valuable items that belonged to the perpetrator's family. The goal was to take away the most valuable things from the murderer, marking the offender's honor. Another form of revenge was marking the offender's honor as a public humiliation. This could involve actions that made the offender look dishonorable in the eyes of the community, such as ruining their reputation or image. 4. Resolving revenge. After revenge had been carried out, justice didn't end there. Viking society had a process of reconciliation, where members of the community would try to resolve the aftermath of the revenge. If the avenger killed the perpetrator without community consent, they might face legal consequences and could be expelled from the community. This shows that while blood for blood was a legal right, it wasn't an action to be taken lightly, and there were consequences to be considered. 5. Historical example. Njal's revenge. One of the most famous historical examples of blood for blood in Viking society is the revenge saga in Njal's saga, one of the most renowned Viking sagas. In this story, A death led the family of the deceased to take revenge by killing those involved in the death of their loved one. However, this revenge didn't stop with one generation. It stretched across multiple generations. Ultimately, these acts of vengeance not only harmed the rival families, but also led to a series of events that caused the downfall of entire clans. 4. Exile, the most terrifying punishment. In Viking society, punishment wasn't just about killing or bloody revenge. There was also a form of punishment that no one wanted to face, being cast out of society, known as outlawed. This was a form of isolation that Vikings applied to those who couldn't be forgiven or compensated, but weren't serious enough to be killed. When someone was outlawed, it meant they were no longer considered part of the Viking community. They didn't just lose their rights, they were completely shunned from any protection or help from society. This wasn't a temporary sentence or something easily forgiven. Being outlawed meant living in utter loneliness. No one could help those who were cast out. If anyone helped them, they would be considered as complicit in the crime committed by the outlawed person. This wasn't just a punishment for the criminal, but also for anyone who dared to associate with them. In the Viking era, respect for the community and clan solidarity was paramount. Those who were outlawed became ghosts in society, unable to contact family, friends, or anyone from the community they were once a part of. They couldn't go to Thing to file complaints. They couldn't ask for help when sick or starving. 5. Respect for law in a barbaric society. Vikings were not lawless, as many believe. They had laws, courts, and justice. Despite living in a world of violence and constant war, they maintained ethical principles and the rule of law. A Viking warrior didn't just fight for victory, but to protect his honor and respect for himself and his clan. They could be merciless on the battlefield, but they never violated justice. Every act of vengeance, every outdoor trial, every action had a reason, a consideration, and clear justice behind it. And most importantly, they didn't just respect the law, they respected it more than their own lives. So, do you still dare to call them barbarians? Remember, in this world, the Vikings may be fierce warriors, but it is the law and honor that created a strong Viking society, where every action had meaning and purpose. They were not lawless people. They lived and fought for justice, for honor, and for society.